Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Reckoning of Roku chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 13, which is called Not Really a Bird Guy. So funny title. Once again, YouTube channel membership is available on the channel if you would like to help support the channel, but we'll get into this one. So there's a bit more to this one because we have some scenes here and we get the reaction of the initial kind of arrival on the island from Roku and Gatso, plus a few other little bits and pieces. But we arrive here and we see that, okay, if they had properly tried to just sort of fly in on the glider, Roku dangling from the glider would have got him smashed against a bunch of rocky spires basically that are along the shore here. So they just barely managed to avoid this. Gyatso sort of made the right call, sort of like dropping them both in the water like a little far out, but they're basically on land at this point. And Roku notes that he's never seen a coast like this, even though he has sailed across the Fire Islands several times. Now Gyatso reacts to this and is like, let me guess, vacations on your family's pleasure vessel. And then Roku doesn't even answer, but is like, the answer was yes. He just says, it's unnatural is all I'm saying, just like this fog. So straight away, that's an interesting idea in terms of like an unnatural coastline. Unlike any other island kind of nearby. Kind of remember that little detail based on something we'll find out about going forward, basically. Gyatso says, this place has a strange spiritual energy. Do you feel it? And Roku's like, I do not. Was he meant to? Like, he's a little bit concerned that like he probably should if this place actually is notable to like Gyatso, but Roku can't because he's so early in his training. Gatu then says, maybe there's more to the island than what Sozin told you. And Roku's like, maybe, but in his head he's thinking, why would Sozin keep something from me? At this point we bring up Lola, and Roku points out that, look, she'll be fine. She probably went back to the Southern Air Temple, or she might stay close by. Now the way he words it, Gyatso takes maybe a little bit of offense to, of like, maybe she'll stay close by since the two of you are so spiritually connected. But because that connection is sort of based on like airbending to a certain degree, the question comes up about like how connected is Gyatso, so will Lola go back or not? We don't really know. He responds to Roku with this, or maybe your special avatar animal guide can help guide us the next time we're in need. Oh wait, you don't have one. And Roku responds with this, Avatar Kyoshi didn't bond with hers until later in life. And then Gyatso says, but Avatar Zito grew up with his dragon, right? And Roku's like, yes. So just a little bit of a sidebar here on animal guides, of course. So obviously Roku doesn't have his yet, but we know it's going to be the dragon Fang. So Roku does actually get a dragon at some point. We don't really know the story about how he gets Fang, so we'll see if that they maybe approach doing that maybe in like the next book or whatever. But the really interesting detail here is actually Avatar Kyoshi didn't bond hers until later in life, which is interesting because going into Shadow of Kyoshi, FCE said in one of the pieces of marketing that this book, Shadow of Kyoshi, will tell you what Kyoshi's like animal companion is. And we come out of the book and we're like, the only scene that fits what he said was this scene of her with the fox that guides her to eventually have the interaction with Avatar Yang Chen. And it was basically a knowledge seeker fox-like thing. I think they noted the eye color was slightly different, but most people coming out of that were like, that's it? And then there's the question of like aren't those spirit animals rather than like an actual animal? And like, can the Avatar kind of, spirit guide be a spirit animal or what? Here they seem to be kind of course correcting a little bit by saying Avatar Kyoshi didn't bond hers until later in life, which I don't think you can interpret that as being like, oh, she was 17, 18 when she discovered hers, when Roku's only 16 here. They're referring to, obviously, it is quite a bit later. Now, they don't say what that animal is. Is it the same spirit fox that maybe she met initially there but only properly connected to later on? They don't really say anything about that, but it's interesting that they bring it up, given that it was a somewhat unsatisfying thing that ended up coming out of the Shadow of Kyoshi, but only really because FCE said we would get the reveal in the book, but we kind of didn't. So maybe they've kind of reset that and just acknowledged that, okay, that fox maybe isn't a super important thing for Kyoshi, and it did just guide her to Yangchen. We'll see what happens. Zito having a dragon and growing up with his dragon, given that we were told earlier on in the book that he was discovered as the Avatar when he was younger than usual, apparently because he bent another element early on. So where did he get his dragon from? Because the impression we get from all of this stuff is that dragons are always rare. Maybe if we go way back in history, dragons are much more common around the world. But the question is, like, we don't really know where anyone really gets a dragon from overall. And the fact that, like, okay, Zito, Roku, and Sozin, like, all have to get them is like a bit of an interesting dynamic. So we'll see what actually happens there. But it's just always worth focusing on, because I think everyone loves the whole animal guy dynamic. And hearing about multiple avatars, one sort of being referenced here, is kind of cool. But anyway, what happens next? They're kind of wandering around. They just note how, like, the atmosphere, the air is hot and humid, that sort of thing. Which way do we go? And Roku's like, okay, well, Sozin said he encountered the Earth Kingdom on the eastern coast. We're more towards the south, so we'll go northeast, and we should eventually get to that exact same spot and find the Earthbender. So we'll go that way. And he starts walking in the opposite direction, and Gyatso has to be like, whoa, northeast is that way. So Roku trying to be confident, but not knowing the directions, of course, which is part of what led them astray a little bit already. But, just the idea of him trying his best to be the leader here, but not quite having the skills, as we see, and we'll see. So yeah, they continue along the coast here. They initially, there's not a lot of talking kind of going on here. Roku can, of course, use his firebending to start campfires when they need to. They note here, as night fell, the fog dissipated, only to be replaced by darkness. So they still can't really see anything. But it is notable that the fog isn't just up at all times, which is important to note for reveals we will get later on. And then so they're at the camp, and they're kind of eating, basically. Gyatso roasted some seaweed he collected along the way, while Roku took a crab into the coals. As they waited for their respective meals to cook, Roku used his firebending to make a cup of tea. He inhaled the spicy aroma, took a sip, and let out a contented sigh. And Gyatso asks to try it, and Roku lets him. And he's like, whoa, that's really good. And Roku notes, Fire Nation tea leaves. I snuck some in with me even though I was told not to. I've been saving them for special occasions. Like finding a secret island? Yes, the Avatar's first victory here. So they share the Fire Nation tea here. And Gyatso then kind of blackmails Roku a little bit here. As long as you keep sharing your secret stash with me, I won't tell Sister Disha about your contraband. And he's like, no, don't do that. I will, because you've had Air Nomad tea. It's like Sky Bison backwash. No way I'm going back to that. So I guess this is sort of the reveal of how Gyatso gets more into tea to a certain degree. Is just him trying the Fire Nation tea for the first time here and realizing Air Nomad tea is not great. So did the discussion about spices in food, but then the idea of actually there being more to the tea is definitely something he does like. And it's just noted, Roku notes in his head, maybe as the young airbender matured, he will become less irritating. But then we have a scene cut here, and again, as Roku wakes up early, and what he does here is he tries to do the same movements that Gyatso was doing to do airbending. So he wakes up early, tries to mimic these, nothing's really happening. Gyatso comes over and is like, hey, I can help you out here. The first part of airbending training is knowing how to fall. And Roku's like, oh cool, what do I do? What's the first lesson? And Gatso's like, I'm going to push you over. Just visualize a cushion of air breaking your fall, and just go with it. Just accept the fall. And so Gatso pushes him over. Roku falls to the ground. Nothing happens. Gatso gets up and is like, great work. But here's a suggestion. Wait for your airbending master. So Gyatso's just like, don't try and go ahead with the airbending training when you have no clue what you're doing. So another practical joke from Gyatso here. And then the final sequence is basically just kind of, again, referencing the title here. So where does the title line come in? They're walking around and they see a lot of like vegetation. They're starting to see some plants here and see some animals. Gyatso says, I don't recognize many of these plants. Do you? And Roku says, I'm not really a plant guy. Gyatso then is like, oh, the birds, do you hear them? And Roku's like, okay, that's cool, but I'm not really a bird guy either. And Gyatso says, oh, I am. I'm not really interested in hearing about birds, is what Roku says. So Gyatso responds with, you're not into plants, you're not into birds, what are you into? And Roku's like, I'm more of a dragon guy. And Gyatso's like, what? You're not a dragon guy. You don't know me. I know you enough to know that you want people to think you're a dragon guy, but aren't really a dragon guy. And Roku doesn't respond to this, of course. So there's a little bit of frustration coming in because they're walking along the coast and nothing seems to be changing. It seems to be exactly the same. They're kind of hiking up a little bit. And basically the idea is eventually they crest over kind of like a hill. And finally they find effectively the location where like Sozin and everyone else arrived on the island. So they finally kind of get here and the relief is kind of palpable here, is basically the idea here. So once again, we're doing the kind of slow, steady arrival onto the island while also doing the introduction to Gyatso and Roku, which is important, I think, to do early on because of what they do not too long from now with the kind of trajectory of the book at a certain point. But still, some interesting stuff in this one to talk about. I would say mostly it probably is the little section on the kind of whole idea of like the animal guides is more of the like lore details stuff. Like, oh yeah, okay, Kyoshi animal guide. Now, whether they're highlighting that she had multiple animal companions, she probably did, or they're specifically noting her actual noted animal companion was only later in life. Who knows? Zito Dragon is a very cool detail to know and get sort of like confirmation on. The little bit with the T is a nice kind of connection between the two of them and just kind of joking around. Gyatso still kind of agreeing with the idea of like, you've got to wait to just start your training in a normal way. And then just the fun joking about the idea of Roku probably does need to study up a little bit on just his knowledge of a lot of stuff. Of just like, come on, some basic knowledge of like birds, animals, plants would be sort of helpful here. But they're finally here is the main takeaway here. So, not the most kind of super incredible chapter, but it's the character work that's being done here that's important. Sometimes you do just need to have a bit of time for your characters to get to know each other, which is what we've been doing across these couple of chapters here. So yeah, in the comments let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching and bye.